I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. I wanted to take 5 minutes and hop on here and talk about Caribbean med schools. I know that the topic of Caribbean med schools is a little controversial. A lot of people have really strong opinions about it either way. And I wanted to share my perspective and how it's evolved over the last 10 years. So I started out my career, well, about halfway through my career so far. I was the director of admissions at an allopathic med school in New York. And when I first took that position and I was working at the med school, I developed pretty strong opinions about the Caribbean med schools, and that was honestly primarily because of conversations that I had with students who had went to Caribbean med schools and who were trying to transfer back to the U.S. Into U.S. med schools, which is almost impossible. That almost never happens. We were not taking anyone in, as far as I could tell, nobody else was. So these students who were calling were sounded pretty desperate. They ran out of financial aid and they needed to get back to the United States. So I had this really negative impression of Caribbean med schools. And when I left the med school and I went over to the undergrad advising side, almost immediately the Caribbean med schools reached out to me and were trying to build a connection with me because, of course, they wanted me to make referrals to them. At first, I was really rude. I was so rude. I feel so bad now looking back. I asked really all the questions everybody wants to know, right? I would say, well, how many people drop out of your school? And how many of your students don't get to take the boards? And I asked all of the questions, and some of them were really forthcoming with information, and some of them, avoided the topics. And then one of the schools invited me to go to the school and check it out. And I was like, sure, right? It's a free trip to the Caribbean. I'll go to your school and check it out. And I went, and I'll be honest, I went with a chip on my shoulder. I went for the free trip. I did not expect to feel any way about it. I did not expect to like it. I expected to ask really tough questions when I got there. And so when I got there, there were some things that pretty much happened the way I expected. I didn't, I expected it to be a mediocre type of curriculum, which I found the curriculum to be really basic. I expected large class sizes, which is what it was. But some things that surprised me about the one school I went to. So I guess it does make a difference which school we're talking about. So truthfully, there are 50 Caribbean med schools in the Caribbean. They are absolutely not all created equal. It's really important for you to know that. Some of the med schools are scams. Some of them have no legitimate connection to the United States. So the first thing you need to do when if you are thinking about a Caribbean med school, is make sure that it has accreditation in the states that you're interested in working in. Each school has to be accredited in individual states. If it doesn't have accreditation in your home state, you're going to have a really hard time ever getting back to your state. So first of all, the first Caribbean med school that I went to is owned by a US corporation. It was owned at that time by DeVry. And as soon as I heard that, my interest changed, because I don't know why, I just assumed they were all owned by foreign nations. I don't know why I thought that. But this was an American company owned by American business people who opened up the med school in another country. I'm not going to get into the logistics of why that is, but it is what it is. So there are actually two schools owned by the same company. AUC, American University of the Caribbean, and Ross University are owned by the same American corporation. So keep in mind, I've been to dozens of med schools across the country. I've seen a lot of different med schools, different facilities, different ways that med school is delivered, med education is delivered. So I went in with my eyes wide open, understanding what a medical school looks like. Now, first of all, it's easy to become enamored with the fact that this med school is literally sitting on a beach. You are surrounded by beautiful blue water, palm trees, 80-degree weather. There is nothing more beautiful than a Caribbean island. So first of all, you gotta kind of go in and see past that, right? If you can get past the beauty of it, you're like, okay, now really show me what this is all about. So in the first school I went to, I will say the things that really disappointed me was the library. I felt like the library was really subpar compared to the American libraries that I had seen. And it's not that the libraries need to be large, because everything is online. It was the lack of information they provided, because keep in mind, I knew what a medical education library should consist of. I used to give the tours of the med ed library at the school I worked at. So I was very familiar with the publications and what the top and the number of publications schools should have. And when I asked those questions, I didn't get that information. I got really basic watered down information, almost like they didn't expect that question from me. So that was a little disappointing. But what I will say, what I was absolutely impressed by was the clinical facilities. So I've been in the sim labs at dozens of schools. I've been in the standardized patient labs. I've been in the clinical skills labs. This facility honestly was nicer than almost any facility I had been in, and I had worked at a brand new med school. So because it was owned by such a financially successful American corporation, the way I saw it was they invested in their facilities. So the school itself was extremely nice, very high tech. And when we got to the clinical facility site, which was right on campus, I was blown away at how many resources the students had. So how many opportunities they had to train at a very early age, so early stage. So the first, second year of med school, they were already putting them in these skills centers and training them to do things, which for a lot of medical US medical schools, they don't let, I mean, they definitely do standardized patients, they definitely do things, but it just seemed to me like a lot more than most of the med schools. So that was really impressive. I was also really blown away by the student engagement with the community. So this was in a third world country, and there was no getting around that. So when you left campus, it was very clear that you were in a third world country. There were shacks, there were people living on the streets. It was very clear poverty. The students in the school they're very much leaders in the country in terms of providing services and community service to the people. And we were fortunate enough to go on one of their community service days and see that in action and hear the recipients of the services that they provide. And that to me was like what won me over. After that, I was like, yeah, you can learn science anywhere. You can learn how to take the step. You can figure out how to learn the medical education, because truthfully, the first 2 years are didactic in nature. The information comes from books. Most med students at most med schools don't even go to class. They learn it all online. They show up and take their tests. So for me, I wasn't necessarily concerned about the didactic portion, but the bonus, like the extra things that came with the school, this me that sold it. However, what I was concerned about, and I think everyone is concerned about, is the number of people who don't make it. And that still concerns me because, there is some degree of ethics that's involved when they take students who clearly haven't demonstrated their academic capabilities to be able to perform well. So students who are continuing to get C's and D's into their fourth year of college have not demonstrated their ability to handle a rigorous medical curriculum. That's me speaking from an advisor and a former admissions person point of view. If you ask a student who has straight C's in their fourth year if they can handle med school, most of them are going to come up with a pretty good case as to why they're ready and have every reason under the sun why those C's are not indicative of their ability to handle med school. So, some of those reasons are pretty compelling. Students who want this really badly put up a really good case as to why they deserve that opportunity. So what the Caribbeans do is it gives them an opportunity, right? Sure, you can go to med school. We're going to charge you twice as much. They are not hiding the fact that you will graduate $400,000 in student debt versus the $200,000 in student debt you'll graduate from a US school. So you're going to pay twice as much to go to a Caribbean med school. You're going to pay twice as much to have the opportunity to do med school. They are letting you try. When you can't do it, they have no qualms about sending you back home, right? You can't do it, you have to leave. But they gave you that option. So as a grown adult, a grown-up pre-med student who wants to be a doctor, you get to decide if you're going to go drop $200,000 on your first year to try to take the boards. That is, this is my changed perspective, right? Because truthfully, I've had many students who I really care about and who I really believe in have gone to the Caribbean. and they did great. They told me they had a wonderful time there. They took the boards, they're practicing in the US. And then on top of that, over my years of experience, I've had many opportunities to go out to dinners and with alumni, and I've sat down at dinners with, I can't tell you how many, dozens of physicians who graduated from Caribbean med schools, who are now practicing in the US. And they're not just practicing, they are thriving. They have leadership positions. They are doing really powerful things in their lives. And it didn't make a difference for them whether they went to the Caribbean or in the US. So when I've met real live people who are doing so well in life and went to the Caribbean, I can't help but change my perspective, right? I was forced with some information, forced to face some facts that going to the Caribbean can lead to success. Is the Caribbean for everybody? Absolutely not. Here are some things that I think are reasons why you would not go to the Caribbean. If you don't have the ability to take out private loans, so if your credit score is not good enough or your family's credit is not good enough, you're going to run out of funding at the Caribbean med schools. You're going to need to take out additional loans because I don't think the federal loans are going to cover your 400,000. So you need to have access to additional funding. Your family should not have to put up their house for you to go to med school. So you need to know ahead of time what your funding sources are. It's unfortunate because if you come from a low income background, the Caribbean might not be a good option for you. And that's really inequitable on their part, but it is what it is. They have scholarships. You can definitely look into their scholarship options. But that's one of the big barriers I see. If you have access to funding, then that's not an issue. The second thing is you need to be independent. If you are someone who goes and sees your family every single weekend, and if you can't be away from your family for more than a month, you really can't move to another country and do med school by yourself, because the moment you get there, you start med school. You don't have time. You don't have 6 months to cry and feel bad. You really need to jump in and be ready to go. So this is, moving to another country requires you to get visas. It requires you to move your whole life and literally emigrate to another country for 2 years. If you can't do that, then you should not go to another country because it's not going to go well. You're going to get there, you're going to have some emotional problems, and then you're going to have to go back home and you waste a lot of money. So you need to know for yourself that you're capable of leaving your friends and family and doing that. You need to be okay not having a car. You need to be okay shopping at small grocery stores. There are a lot of comforts in life in America. You need to be okay not going to Target, not going to Starbucks. You are really going to be living a different lifestyle. You are going to be living in a third world country. That's exhilarating, and for some people, very scary. If that idea of exploration and giving back to a country that is so desperate in need of help, if that's really exciting to you and you're interested in global health and you want to work in let's say Doctors Without Borders in the future, no problem, right? That's an amazing training for that experience. But if you need your necessities in life, this is not the place for you. So those are some things I would consider if you're thinking about a Caribbean school. I've been to the Caribbean school in Grenada, St. George's. I've also been to the school in Mexico and Guadalajara. And I visited the clinical site for Ochsner, University of Queensland, and New Orleans. So I can definitely talk about the clinical site. And I know I've had some students who've gone to Ochsner for med school. So I'm able to talk about any of those other experiences. I have different opinions about St. George's versus AUC. Unfortunately, I never got to go to Ross. I was supposed to go and then COVID hit. But if you have any other questions about Caribbean med schools, definitely post them in the chat. I'm happy, or you can message me and I'm happy to give you my perspective on that. All right, have a great day, everybody.